Welcome, everyone. We're super excited you're joining us today. Fernanda and I are excited to have a conversation together. It's number 2 in a series that our sister agencies have launched to sort of share experiences about who we are with each other, and hopefully our listeners beyond our best friends will also tune in to listen to our conversation. Probably going to center story, relationship, a little bit about ourselves, and we're excited to be here today. Kowatsi, Dehename Shadiin, Hanusta. Hello, my name is Shadiin. I am Laguna Pueblo and Chicana from New Mexico. I live right now in Portland on the land of many indigenous people, and I'm excited to be here with you today. I'll turn it over to Fernanda.
Hola, Shadiin. Hola a todas y a todos. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarnos. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm Fernanda. I'm based in Mexico City, and I'm part of the Impacto Social Metropolitan group team based in Mexico City. And I'm very excited to talk to you, Shadiin, about our experiences and listening to you and learn from you and share with the people who are with us right now.
This is exciting for our listeners, like we said, our watchers, for the people who are joining us in whatever format you're joining us. This is our second. The first one we had 2 other sisters of ours, Bernice and Cirilli, have a really beautiful, deep, engaging conversation. And so we're going to hope to honor the first one with a little bit of our own sharing. So we'll start with a little bit about ourselves. And I sort of wanted to lean in a little bit to story for a lot of indigenous communities. As we enter winter, winter becomes the deep storytelling time where we sort of gather around our hearth or our fires or our kitchen tables and lean into the darkness and welcome story and lessons. And so I'll use that just as a little bit a way to tell you a little bit about myself in the context of my family. I have a huge extended family, 19 aunts and uncles, over 60 first cousins who I consider my brothers and sisters. And one of my sisters actually just defended her dissertation the other day. And so we've been having big celebration in our home and our community to see another Indigenous woman get a degree. The story I wanted to share with you briefly a little bit about me is related to my son. My youngest son is 18 and he is at Emory University and he got sick. He had some sort of food poisoning and it was horrible for him. He was throwing up, it was terrible. He's probably gonna be like absolutely annoyed that I'm sharing this story in this public way. But the thing that I wanted to share was his friends around him when he was going through this pretty serious illness brought him tea and Pepto-Bismol and rice and crackers, all of these things that it felt like what they were practicing were things that their families had done for them, that they were adulting in this way, the only way they knew. And where could they have possibly learned that? And it's from their own parents or aunties or uncles or fathers or grandparents or siblings who had cared for them when they got sick. And it just made me think so much about what that ancestral wisdom is in families, what it looks like. And my son was reflecting because I don't have Pepto-Bismol in our home. That's not like a thing we would ever have purchased. And so what he's getting to see is other ways of being and caring through other families. And I was just so moved by that. And so when I think about self and who we are and how we identify each other, like I think my introduction of self is, I think, really grounded in trying to always recognize that ancestral wisdom and to think about what it is to expand that family and community. It's, they talk about given family and chosen family, and I don't think it's that much of a dichotomy. I think we can all create family in particular ways when we invite other ways of being and knowing. And I just feel like it was so modeled in my son's experience getting really ill. I mean, they put him in an isolation hotel in case he had COVID for a couple of days, but his friends were just bringing their own family medicine to him in that way. And I'm moved by that. So that was just a tiny sort of story intro to who I am. Why don't you tell me a little bit about you, Fer?
That's awesome, Shadiin, to hear that story. And it reminds me that today in Mexico, we celebrate the Day of the Dead, which is also totally related to remembering and honoring those who have already left, but are yet still with us in their legacy and their teachings, and how they actually made it possible for us to be here right now. And so as I'm speaking to you, I'm also thinking about how the person I came to be and the person I am right now is very much related and inspired in many different ways by the people and my ancestors and my grandparents and my mom and dad and my family, and also, as you were saying, like the extended family, like friends and people who actually inspired me, but also by those experiences where I felt like there was something with which I didn't identify fully in that part. So by telling you this, I mean, like, I was born and raised raised in Mexico City in a traditional middle class family, mom, dad, 3 kids. And actually my family was also very conservative in their view, in the world views. My family, I have like grandparents who were also Christian pastors. So I think that was that is a key part of me, both in terms of many things that inspired me to, like, in terms of service, in terms of thinking of people, of our communities as something much bigger than ourselves. And that it's at the same time, it taught me to question many things. Because, for example, in my family, I grew up not celebrating the Day of the Dead because of our Christian and Protestant beliefs. So you see, there is a first, like, a first division with our, or kind of I don't know, something that was broken from what I was taught in terms of religion, in terms of spiritual beliefs, from that of the land where my own family came from and from where I was also born. So so that has always made me think of how some systems, also, as much as they are good to serve communities and to serve people and to allow people to expand and to grow, they can at the same time become oppressive and detached from our roots, right? So I think that's something that has been always in my reflections as I've grown older, and that has helped me define who I am and the work I do.
I'm so struck by your framing or your description of the, here's what we did when we were younger, here's what I do now, and that trajectory to where you are now, because it makes me think of the various levels of deep trust I had in sort of things in my family and how that's evolved or shifted, and how I feel like in some ways I'm coming back to it, even though it's hard to, so my family was very conservative also. And on my mom's side, very, very Baptist religion. We went to vacation Bible school, and they're indigenous in that. So there are all these elements of colonization that are super present there and really hard for me to navigate when I was younger. And I used to say, I grew up in poverty. I grew up in poverty because I did. I had one pair of jeans through high school. My sister and I shared a bra in high school. Like we were pretty broke. But I've switched that to, yes, like tangibly poverty, not tangibly love abundance, just abundant love. And what does that mean to have those together? But the disconnect I struggled with my family is not trusting a lot that they could see a little bit of the larger picture, even in their stalwart beliefs. So for example, when I was in college, it was kind of a big deal for me to go to college. I got a scholarship to go to an Ivy League school, which was a big deal from where I come from. And I wrote this article that was anti-Yale my senior year, and I knew it was going to be in the graduation edition. And all of my family had saved all of their pennies for years to be able to come to my graduation. My aunt worked for, at the time, Continental Airlines, which isn't around anymore. And as an employee, she got 10 discounted tickets for my family, and they all came up from New Mexico. And all I could think about was, they're coming all this way and they're going to see this really critical article that I wrote against the university. And I was afraid to trust them. I was afraid, especially on my mom's side, that this aunt who I loved, my Aunt Ruth, who inspired me in so many ways and is actually the mother of my sister who just got her PhD. I was afraid that she was gonna like not understand, you know, and be so in this colonized sort of religious way of responding that I was so scared. And finally I just broke down crying and told her like the day before graduation. So because they were going to read this paper and read this article, I told her, I was like, I'm so sorry. Like, I know you're proud of me. And it's not that I'm not happy that I got an education, but like Yale was so hard and they were so mean and they were so, right. And she said, like, my beautiful daughter, do you think we don't understand how hard this was for you? And I was struck by this. Why didn't I trust that? And what was I pushing away from? And that it wasn't as clear as I thought it was when I was younger. Like my relationship with my family and all of their ways of being conservative, not conservative, colonized, not colonized. What was stopping me from leaning into that love? And I don't know, sometimes it keeps me up at night and it makes me think, how did that shape what I want to do or what change I want to see in the world or what I'm trying to like help people see in the work that we do? And I'm wondering the degree to which everybody's family, like everybody in our generation is sort of navigating through understanding those family dynamics in the world we're in.
Totally. And I'm very touched that you put the emphasis on that love that actually drives what I guess honestly that most of what people do in this field, regardless of what they believe, is very driven by love. And I see that. I also see that in my family, and I think that's what actually has allowed me to navigate, as you were saying, these contradictions of thinking and these tensions that we have, because they are there and they have been there for forever. But at the end of the day, I trust that a lot of the inspiration that I got, probably without even realizing that, because I was so young when I saw my grandmother, for example. My grandparent died when I was very, very young, but then I saw my grandmother like just moving forward with her beliefs, and like just she would wake up at whatever time she was called by someone who was sick, by someone who was in need, and she would wake up and take a bus and travel whatever distance she was needed to travel to go there and to serve what she believed in. And at the same time, I also saw, and I also realized that in that process, she herself was suffering from a lot of violence, right? Because she was a woman. Probably she was at the time one of the few Protestant leaders in Mexico City, and probably in the country. But she wasn't allowed to be a leader as such, because she was a woman, right? So I saw that, and I saw how much she fought for like what she believed in, and at the same time she was very mistreated by people who were supposedly part of the community, because she wasn't supposed to have that place or that role. So, and I also saw like my aunts, for example, having a different role, even when they would do so much work in the community of faith, etc. So, and how they were not allowed when I was young, they were not allowed to wear any other clothes than long skirts, or not wearing earrings. So, you know, so I grew up seeing that gender violence, gender discrimination, and that obviously it wasn't the only place where I saw that. It was like all around the place. And I think that got me very inspired in many ways, like in the conversations that I heard, even related to politics, right? Because at the time in Mexico, actually being Christian, as in Protestant, was like probably not even 1% of the population. And for a long time, actually, in Mexico, it was prohibited to practice any other religion that was not Catholic religion. So, so all of that was like at play when I grew up, right? Like defending beliefs, while at the same time watching like different dynamics that were not precisely fair in terms, as I was saying, gender, and also economic opportunities, etc. So I think that was pretty inspiring for me, even when I probably didn't realize at the time.
I've been thinking a lot about gender violence, especially in the context of Indigenous women being raped 1 in 3 and the murdered missing Indigenous. And I was trying to reflect, like, as I'm listening to you talk about, like, when did I see or recognize like the divisions or the inconsistencies? I've been thinking about it for about 2 weeks now. Like, when did I first see it, or when was I first aware of it? And interestingly, which most people, I don't know how they would reflect as people of color, but as a Pueblo woman, women are centered. It's matriarchal, it's matrilineal. Like, there's no question that we're not the center, and we're supposed to be talking and advocating and being of service. And then you have my father, you know, this Mexican farmer who married this Indigenous woman that you would think stereotypically would fall into some of these like macho ways, but all of the men in his family too are very much center the women, like women should be, you know, revered, loved, like held up. And so when I left home and went to the rest of the world, I was dumbfounded and shocked to the degree to which I saw the way we were treated. Like, women are treated horribly in classes, professors talking over you, you're not supposed to be in a science class or a math class or all of the things, or then also just the blatant sexism and sexual harassment, that it was a given that you were going to be sexually harassed in your class, in your workplace, in your that was just an absolute, no matter what. And I felt like I was so naive, because that was not the way we were treated in our family at home, in particular, with my aunts and my uncles. And there were a lot of the things that weren't great, like other things that came up that are historical trauma and legacies of boarding school and sexual abuse and violence and alcoholism. And some of those things were all very present too, and in the colonization and the religion. But sexism, I never experienced in that way in my family, never. And so I always feel this deep betrayal every time it happens. Like I can't, I'm like aghast at it as opposed to being used to it. And I can't find a way to reconcile that or heal in some way. Like there's some block that I can't figure out when I think about our family and then reality. And so when my father is always saying, or used to always say, he's crossed over, would say, your job is to be of service in the world. It's hard to be of service in the world when you struggle to make meaning of that disconnect between home and the world we're trying to navigate. Does that make sense?
Totally. And I think it's hard to be of service when you have to detach from what you are, like as a woman, for example, and a woman in leadership roles, like when you have to detach from what you are, or from what you feel, or from what inspires you, in order to have a position or a role of leadership somewhere. And I think that's one of the main problems that we are facing right now, like in my context in Mexico. So you can see that women make progress in terms of we occupy more spaces, we have more roles, more leadership roles, etc. But the cost that it entails to have those roles, it's still based on violence. It's still based on not allowing to show up yourself as you are, and with all your capacities and all your skills and all your experiences, to actually be of service. Because how can you actually be of service if you have to leave everything aside to jump in? So in my experience, I worked in politics for many years, and that was kind of the cost that I had to pay for a long time, to try to, because I was really determined to, okay, I like politics, I like to play a leadership role, I'd like to advance my ideas, I'd like to, but at the same time it was 10 years of actually experiencing a lot of different ways of violence that sometimes, as you were saying, you get because I also come from a family where my parents always encouraged me to you can do whatever you want, you can, we believe in you, you believe in yourself, etc. So when you get to a place where you start realizing that no, that's not the way it works, right? Mm-hmm. So you actually start realizing the many ways in which you experience violence and have to just figure it out, how to, I don't know, to move forward. And
yeah, I feel like at home it was a given, you can do and be anything and then when you go out there and you try to be a leader, it's not a given, you have to prove it. And in that proving, in that, then you like almost enact violence on yourself and have no compassion for yourself. Or at least I feel like I don't. Like, work harder, be stronger, work more, prove more. If someone mentions a book, go get it and read it and know it, because you have to know it too. And this expectation, and it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And for our listeners, for our watchers, one of the things that we were talking about in prep was a question around how have we evolved in some way, or what lessons have we learned? And I feel like in that question, when we were sort of preparing for this time together, I was thinking about what does it take to undo all of those? Like, if you learned one way of being at home, and then you had to relearn a different way of being in the world to succeed in the way that, you know, people would call us pretty typically successful with our jobs and our salaries and where we are and where we live. The things that helped me be successful are pretty toxic, and I'm really sad about it. And unlearning them is really hard. To do a little full circle back to the sister who I talked about, who just got her doctorate in education. She had reached out to me about wanting to like dream about tribal colleges, and do I want to dream together with her? And in my like terrible way of being, I was like, oh yeah, I like put her on an email and CC'd the person at Metropolitan Group, who my friend who helps with my calendar, and then set up the meeting. And she texted me, did you just like ask your secretary to set up a meeting with me, your sister? And I was, yes, like, yes. And I just, I mean, I've been sad about it for days, thinking, it's one thing to believe in centering love and family and relationship, and it's another thing altogether to try to unlearn all of the things that honestly helped us get to where we are. And it's frustrating, I think, sometimes to think about those lessons and what it means. And of course, my sister's going to love me forever. Of course I can, you know, I'm so sorry. I did do that. Like, I can't believe it. Right. And not that the person who did the calendar is my secretary, she is also my friend, but the concept writ large was, did you source me out to set up a time to dream about something that's so important? I don't know. I'm wondering if you have other examples like that, where you struggle in the learning, unlearning, and trying to show up better in places that actually still don't honor.
Sure, I have many, unfortunately. And I'm also, as you're saying, like trying to unpack and unlearn, and all of the things that I've done that have not contributed to building a different culture, a different place. And one of those, I remember one time where I was working at the House of Representatives, and one day a girl that used to work with me, a young woman that used to work with me, she arrived, and she had been having like trouble with some deliverables, etc. And at some point she started crying with me, and I said, like, please, like, my first reaction was saying, like, please don't cry at work. And at that point, honestly, my reaction was from a place where I knew in my own experience that you couldn't cry at work in a place of power, of being surrounded by men, but who are always just looking at how weak women are, or how fragile, or how. So honestly, my first reaction was to say, like, please don't cry at work. You can do that with me, but no one can see you crying at work.
Right.
So, and then I just like, and she said, okay. So she went to the bathroom. And then I've been thinking about that for a long time, like asking myself, how can that how could that even be my first reaction, right?
Yeah.
And I still feel so bad about that. And I'm always like, I've been trying for the last months, I guess. This particular year of COVID and pandemic, etc. I've been trying to recall all those experiences, and honestly, reaching out to people that I feel at some point I disappointed or did something wrong, like that, and saying like, you know what, I'm so sorry for doing that, and I'm just thinking about it and I can't stop feeling awful for that. So, and at the same time, I remember something that you said when we were preparing for this, and I also think that we need to do this with compassion. With compassion for those who we hurt, but also for ourselves, because yeah, it's not that we like, it's not that it's like an excuse for bad, but for wrongdoing or whatever. But I do think that it doesn't help doing this without compassion if we want to heal and if we want really to transform these attitudes or these reactions.
Yeah, I find that that's where I embody the most hypocrisy. Like just real talk. I feel like like back then I probably would have said the same thing, like pulled her like, don't cry in front of them. Like whatever you like, right? And then later would have done the same thing. Like, I'm really sorry I said that. And then now where I am now, like in to the point to where I have evolved as a human right now, if someone else cried on a call, I would encourage, like you show up in your fullest humanity, but would I allow myself to? Right. And so, whereas I feel like I want to create the conditions for people to show up. If they cry, they cry. If they don't, like however they want to show up. And yet a couple of weeks ago, I was on a call where I felt like I held it together. And at the very end, I cried. And I had not an ounce of compassion for myself. It was like, I said a swear word and it was like, yeah, I can't believe you cried. I can't, there was no compassion for self. There was no, whereas, and I feel, I don't know, I feel so much tension in that. I'm calling it hypocrisy, which again, isn't compassionate for self. Like even as I'm saying it out loud, I can't embody like love for the actual struggle because it's grounded in the way we were treated when that happens to us. And that there's loss and there's hurt and there's pain and there's violence in all of it. And I don't know, work in progress. Work in progress. Yeah. When did you, or maybe you kind of talked about this a little bit, like when did you discover an interest in the work that you're currently doing right now? Was there something you saw somewhere in life and it was like, oh no, this is what I always knew I wanted to be doing? Or was it a different trajectory to get there?
No, it was never like, I always envy these people who like were born knowing what they were going to do in life. That's not me. So it's actually being a very long process, but I do know some specific things. For example, I know that from my like a very early age, I was interested in social issues, and I would listen because of my family, and yeah, these conversations happening in different scenarios. I would always be interested in listening to adults talking about politics and social issues and what was going on in the country. So every time my mom would take me to the school, I would be listening to the radio and trying to understand what was going on. And actually it was a time where there were many things going on in Mexico. I was born in the 80s, 81. So in Mexico, many things happened at the time, and particularly in terms of economic crisis, neoliberalism, Latin America, super chaotic times. And I was always interested in listening to what was going on. And that also was mixed with this specific situation of woman, which is very linked to in my circle of family woman. I was always very aware of the different kinds of violence that were happening, in the close circle, and that those two things were very present throughout my childhood and when I was young. And then when I decided to study political sciences, I decided to do my dissertation on the femicides in Ciudad Juárez, that were also happening at the time, and that was a huge issue at the time, like starting to listen that women were murdered like that in a specific place in Mexico, and trying to make sense of what was going on. That was something that really interested me. So from then on, as I entered politics, etc., so like gender became something that was very important to me, because it was very familiar. Like I felt it was something that I needed to work on, definitely. What about you?
I think I kind of was the person who knew what I wanted to be, but that's not what I do now. So like maybe, so it didn't, like, I wanted to be a teacher. I had to leave home and go from the second worst high school in the nation to the second best high school in the nation, because I got a scholarship and I wasn't getting what I felt on my family and to give me the support necessary to make it in life. And so I switched to a different school. And that for me was, I want to be the teacher that I never had. And so I didn't have my family, they were pretty broke. And so I didn't know other jobs existed like the job I have now. I don't even know how to explain to my family what I do for a living. And I struggled for a long time, even when I was just consulting and I was just a national social justice consultant on my own. I didn't know how to explain it. And I asked my son, how do you tell people what I do for a living? He's like, you go and help people like make the world better so there's not racism anymore. I'm like, well, that's pretty succinct. Is that what you think I do? He's like, that's my best guess, Mom. Like, this is like 6 or 7 years ago. So I wanted to be a teacher. And I was, and I taught in a lot of different states, and I loved teaching literature. And poetry and essays and songs, and it filled me with a lot of joy. And when I moved to Oregon, at the time, you couldn't teach school with just a bachelor's degree. And so I had to get another degree, and I wasn't going to redo my teaching license. I wasn't going to do that again. So I became an administrator in public schools, and I hated it. I did it for like 7 or 8 years, and I was miserable. And someone invited me to do research and policy at the state level. And embarrassingly, I don't even know if I could have identified my representatives, the senators, even the representatives of my own county or area. Politics was not something that was super present in my world, aside from, always vote. Like you're sort of the lowest level of like, at least to do that. And somewhere along the line, I think with support and encouragement and being inspired by other people around me, I realized I loved things like strategy and evaluation when communities determine their own measures of success, and what it meant to invite people to shift in their brains from came from poverty and abundant love, as opposed to just poverty, like what it meant, like, you know, the jargony word is asset-based thinking or strength-based thinking, but like that, knowing how to do that better in the work that I was learning how to do, the research and writing policy and evaluation and centering it, anchoring it in the values of strengths. I didn't realize you could make a living doing that. There was no sort of trajectory for how that happens. All I knew was the world of teacher, principal, like education, and, you know, or you move up and become a superintendent. But, you know, in our state, there's so few women superintendents. So I was like, well, I don't know that I'm going to ever be able to be a superintendent. And so I stumbled into the world of organizational strategy and and love and sovereignty, which people call Jedi work, right? Justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, which is really, how do we create spaces to be racially affirming, where everybody can have a healthy ethnic identity development and sense of self. And I'm talking my people too. And so what does it mean for our workplaces to do that and embody it for the people we work with? I didn't know they would pay you to do that. So I think I feel like I stumbled into it. And at the same time, it was all really related to my father. My mom died when I was 6. And my father was and I don't know, maybe this came from my mom. I don't know my mom. So like, if any of my family members who knew my mother would call in and email me if they watch this and tell me more about my mother, my father was very much be of service. So whatever I did had to be around being of service in some way. I just didn't know I could do it this way. And I'm pretty happy to have landed in a place where part of what the call is to hold space for people while they're trying to learn, grow, and grapple in all of the huge things that we're trying to grapple with right now.
Yeah.
Which the shadow side of that is, it's a big toll on us to hold that space for people, and the energy that it asks of us to be patient and to talk about readiness and to help people get from, as we're actually trying to do it and unlearn it ourselves at the same time. I sometimes, on some days, it's, yes, I had a big win, and other days it's, is it really like pushing a boulder up a hill with someone else pulling us by our ankles? Sort of a long way of saying, I thought I knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. But there's never any way anybody, if they had described this to me when you enter school, here's what you can study to become, it would not have ever, like, oh yeah, sign me up for that. I don't even know what that is. And I keep telling my sons, one who's a junior and one who's a freshman in college, that just have fun and study and learn and reach and grow and be humble and lean into the courses that you're in. And nothing is going to determine it, because I'm not a teacher anymore. In the way, I'm not a high school teacher anymore. And because they're like, what do we do? Like the degree and the trajectory and the path. I feel like we all need more invitation to, I don't know, that may be what you do next year. Maybe I'll be doing something different next year. But if it's all aligned in service, as graceless as I am in it, I still think that, I don't know, I think about, what are we going to be doing in 10 years?
And I think, as I hear you, I think we are very lucky at ISMG to have you doing this amazing work and pushing us to align ourselves to what we believe in and to what we actually do. So I think that's a crucial task, because and not only that, but also with the compassion and the grace with which you do it, because you're always open to listening, to lean into our own struggles, right? And And for me, like it's been amazing to interact with you and to learn from you, and I think your work will definitely change the the way we show up in the work we do, and I hopefully that will reflect in the well-being and the justice we want to create around us. So
Well, I mean, I certainly appreciate that. I think I'm very clunky and graceless, but one of the things that happened at MG a couple weeks ago, when I hit a wall, and it was a struggle with some serious racism, not at MG, but the team the team that I was on, the internal team, they were so fearless and so supportive and so loving. We didn't have the answer, but the given was no matter what, we were gonna support one another. And I'd never experienced that before. And it's not like in other jobs where I worked, there weren't also nice and loving people. But to me, it fills me with so much hope as we struggle in this racial reckoning and post-pandemic or middle of the pandemic, or wherever, as we're like the getting murdered and the climate crisis, like all of it, as we're struggling, to constantly be centered with folks who really want to like make change and love one another. And even as we don't have it all figured out, I am so inspired by anyone who shows up with curiosity and wanting to learn and wanting to try something. And if we fall, then we fall, but at least we tried. And in public service, as you know, as a public servant in the political world that you navigated, that's not present. It wasn't present in public service in Oregon, and it's not because they're not good people in either location.
Yeah,
they're warriors and they want to do well and they want to do right, but the system isn't set up to actually allow for those spaces of love. I had to find workarounds if I wanted to do a blessing. And so like at a meeting or something. And so instead of blessing, I would read a poem. I'm like, okay, that's a way I could get into it, or that's it. Like, but how many more workarounds do we keep doing to the point that it shapes us into not even the image of what we were hoping to show up as in our fullness? And so I feel so much gratitude to be in relationship with you and your team at ISMG, and really deeply learning the deep change you all are trying to make there. And then the colleagues at MG, and really trying. And if we can keep showing up saying, we are so not perfect and we are going to get it wrong, but damned if we're not going to get back up, hold each other's hands, offer water, and pat each other's backs with comfort as we stand back up and try again. And if we call into each other, that we can also just slow down a little.
Yeah.
In that,
Yeah.
I think that might invite some more breathing space, because I do think we struggle in our work to go just a little bit slower, because we want to run at that change fast.
Yeah.
And then we fall right back into the agenda, time, done, get it done, deliver. And that I struggle with.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like there is like our sense of urgency, it's also needs also to be balanced with our own well-being and the well-being of our teams and our colleagues and even our partners and allies. So I think that's also a different way of experiencing and thinking of power, from a place where power is to push people to their limits and not caring about what they can actually do, and to actually building a sense of shared power where we can actually lean into into others and allow others to lean on us, and also to understand that, yeah, that fortunately or not, like, we do not we are not at this point where we set the norms and the rules yet. So but so if we want to change them, we need to actually do things very differently, even if that takes more time to actually get the work done, right?
Yeah, our dear colleague, Sister Jennifer, who also works for Metropolitan Group, she describes it as like, we're trying to revolutionize a system inside the box of the system. Like, how do we not replicate it, yet also be with the constraints of the system? And that is the call. That's the ask. Yeah. In ways. And I'm super grateful to be on this road with you, doing that together.
Me too, Shadiin.
Well, thank you, everybody who tuned in, who listened, who recorded, or who turned it on while you were probably doing your dishes, or maybe I'll say thank you to my children who half the time don't even listen to my podcast, but maybe they'll listen to this or watch this. I had a great time doing this with you.
Me too. Thank you very much for your time. And thank you, Samia and Chantel, for this.